And we begin with reporting on two related facts tonight. Fact number one, Republicans fear that Donald Trump's obviously widely unpopular second term is dragging them down towards what could be a midterm loss or full-blown rout. Fact number two, President Trump's administration is now blatantly pushing these abuses of power, some of them unconstitutional, to change that trajectory, not by actually winning more votes, which is what everyone's encouraged to do in a democracy that uses the rule of law, but no, to change it through pressure, through government force, through possibly illegal prosecutions of their perceived foes, not by offering a popular agenda to win more votes. And it is that very clear contrast between where our democracy could be headed, and no one knows what will happen in the midterms. I'm just telling you what even the Republican Party chair said, that they're bracing for a loss. That's what's happening in our actual lived democracy and the indicators we have, plus Republican losses in November. And then these efforts, some of them possibly on the line, possibly just sort of pushing and squeezing and testing, and some of them, as we've told you, because we'll always keep it real and factual with you, some of them obviously flatly unconstitutional on the other lane. We're talking about attacks on U.S. guardrails from elections to free speech, including what we have here tonight. This is the first time we're seeing, through new body cam video, what was clearly a troubled and chaotic scene as Donald Trump's FBI agents went to seize ballots in Georgia. We have the video from reporting by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The FBI approached in a way that clearly left the local officials concerned about not only the unusual federal raid for old ballots from a long-resolved race, but also whether this legally required Trump FBI warrant was even valid.
So did anybody get a physical copy of the search warrant?
No.
When did they get here?
About 12:30.
Just unannounced?
Unannounced.
Then the FBI, represented through these agents we have in the video, they seem to admit a warrant was at least off. I say that broadly because, again, we're working off the video. We don't have all the materials. But it was off enough that it required, they admitted, amending to even be valid.
The warrant will be amended slightly, but for all intents and purposes, what they had is what it's going to look like. We wanted to let her facilitate us moving through the building to unlock the gates so that we don't have to breach it, because one way or the other, the records are coming with us today.
One way or the other, the records are coming with us. Now, if you've ever wondered, if you've never dealt with an agent, whether it's federal or police coming in, that's how they are. That's how they talk. There is a process for this, but they don't sound like they're negotiating. It may be that there were not problems with the underlying warrant that would make it invalid. That's something lawyers can litigate. It may be slight amendments, which could be okay. It may also be that this whole case blows up in Donald Trump's face in the long run because there isn't a lot of precedent for digging through 6-year-old ballots from an election you lost, where the only known convictions related to that election are from the loser of the election, Donald Trump, and his team. Indeed, his lawyers were sanctioned in Georgia and elsewhere. But more clearly, what I want you to understand tonight is that video shows the power of your federal government, of armed federal agents, seizing ballots from an election settled, as mentioned, 6 long years ago. Now, Donald Trump was the loser of that election in Georgia and, of course, the entire election that year. He lost to Joe Biden. So I say to you, as a news anchor following these stories and always trying to remain calm, what the heck are we doing 6 years later on this of all things? Because you're allowed to debate and talk about whatever you want in America. That's a great thing. You are not allowed to use, abuse, or misuse federal resources because you lost an election. Indeed, while we don't know everything, and I've been careful to state that, in the long run, this is exactly the kind of case that may, like other revenge cases, go up in smoke. But Trump is, 6 years later, directing his government to focus on this, his loss, why he was the loser in Georgia and the loser nationally, which, of course, snowballed into his efforts to join those later convicted thugs who attacked police on Jan 6, and then he pardoned them all. This is all part of that. The law-breaking we know of is on his side, not the other. And he's focused on this rather than, say, fighting crime or lowering prices or any of the number of promises he vowed in his election to work on. This is what he's focused on. And quite personally, I don't say he, like his administration, and then we're kind of filling in all the gaps. No, Donald Trump, new reporting, personally involved in this, taking the step of talking to some of those agents. We saw one of them on camera by speakerphone after the raid. That's unusual. We don't believe the president would usually have all the FBI agents' numbers or place those calls. There is a chain of command, but he did it through an intelligence official and questioned them and praised them and thanked them for working on this inquiry through, as the Times puts it, this unusual call. And that may involve another violation because the National Intelligence Director, Gabbard, was on site and facilitated that call. It's not clear how her foreign intelligence authority would relate to meddling in a long-finished domestic election where her boss lost. She's also, we should note, facing a pending classified whistleblower complaint. Now, just to put this in context, efforts by the president to abuse military or intelligence powers for domestic politics, that's not allowed. That's part of what ended Nixon's presidency. And for those who are skeptical, you might say, well, in the beginning with Nixon, people said, well, I guess he's getting away with it. And he was. That's what happens when powerful people break rules. In the end, he didn't. In the end, many of his aides got in trouble. Some went to prison. Here we are at this moment with some of this stuff spilling out. And the question again being, will there be accountability or not? But Trump is more blatant than Nixon ever was about these violations. He's also making an unconstitutional public demand to try to get the feds to oversee elections in places where Republicans are losing. Now, that is also a no-go. And it's important in these times where people are trying to figure out where is the line and they're testing it. The Republican Senate leader speaking out today saying, no, the president cannot do that. For all the questions about when and how Republicans stand up, or will they just say the obvious, Senator Thune did. Because this isn't even allowed. So he may be confident Trump won't do it, can't do it. There aren't the mechanisms necessarily to do it. But before I even show what Trump's saying and fact check it, I just want to give you the constitutional limits. Because the Constitution gives states the power to decide the, quote, times, places, and manner of holding elections and appointing electors for the presidential election. After the states do that, they are in the lead. Congress may alter some of the state rules, but the president cannot seize or nationalize anything. The president does have a lot of power, and we've seen that in foreign policy. If he wants to go use war powers against Venezuela in real time, we don't see anything stopping him. But the Constitution does stop him and give these other extraordinary powers to the states. And you don't need to be a constitutional scholar to follow the logic. The founders were worried about despots and kings. They were not going to give the president, who is the more unitary officer, control over the elections when they were just standing up this new thing called elections that would try to remove people from power. So they weren't kings. So it's kind of like, duh, of course the president cannot and does not oversee his own election or powers. Now I'm going to show you, as promised, Donald Trump's unlawful claim in a recent podcast with a former FBI employee that didn't last that long in this administration, with the facts in the Constitution.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And we have states that are so crooked, and they're counting votes. We have states that I won that show I didn't win. Now you're going to see something in Georgia.
And on he went. The legal fact check is more important. He's talking about something he cannot do, and that Senate Leader Thune agreed today he cannot do, but he will potentially try to see how far he can go. He also lost Georgia. Fact check. The president was false in that claim. And we know that he knows because he was the one making calls, furtively trying to get extra votes. Why did he need extra votes? Because he knew he didn't have them, because he lost. The Constitution bars all of that. Donald Trump doubled down on some of those remarks today as well when asked by reporters. I'm not going to show you that because we've already fact-checked it, and that's enough in terms of our news standards. Meanwhile, you have the deportation campaign. There was emotional testimony today on ICE agents' aggressive and sometimes lethal tactics. Democrats, who only have certain levers since they're in the minority, they are using their platform powers to try to take additional testimony. So they held a Washington forum where the brothers of Renee Good, as well as other ICE shooting survivors, were able to speak out.
When I think of Renee, I think of dandelions and sunlight. Dandelions don't ask permission to grow. They push through cracks in the sidewalk, through hard soil, through places where you don't expect beauty, and suddenly there they are, bright, alive.
I am born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, where I learned the values of resilience, community, respect, love, and hope. On October 4, 2025, those values were tested when my life was nearly taken by my own government. I know deep down this was God's purpose in having me survive Exxon 5 bullets.
Congressman Garcia also used the forum to put disturbing evidence into the record. These were text messages that Congress has obtained from one of the agents who fired the shots.
Ms. Martinez, these are images of texts sent by the agent who shot you. And they're actually disturbing to read, but I think it's important for the public to see this. The agent linked an article about your shooting and texted, "Read it. 5 shots, 7 holes. I fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes. Put that in your book, boys." Oh, well, it is what it is. It happens. This is someone that works for the United States government.
These are Donald Trump's policies. He is responsible for how his policies are turned into action. The masked menacing, the rampant escalation in violence, the clearly avoidable killings. And the agent looks back on it and says, blank happens. But it doesn't just happen. This is your government. And these are your tax dollars. There is a big accountability mechanism above all others. It is obviously elections. And there are people who are concerned, understandably so, about the efforts I just detailed to try to undermine these elections. And yet, on the other hand, we do have some recent examples. Donald Trump was president when he lost the election at the end of the first term. It's the one he's still reinvestigating. And although major pressure was put in the first modern insurrection of our history, even amid all that, ultimately, he did leave office, just not peacefully. And we had elections in November, and they transpired. And now the question is, heading in this November, towards this November, why is the President of the United States testing whether he can federalize or nationalize elections? Why is he testing his powers to go seize ballots? Once for the past, maybe next time for the present. It is a very real stress test of our democracy. The fact that it can be beat doesn't mean that there are losses along the way. We just showed some of the testimony from human beings hurt or killed in ways that the vast majority of law enforcement experts say were at least avoidable, if not important to investigate as potentially crimes. So that is the stakes of where we are at. Andrew Weissman is here, and we're going to discuss this when we return in 90 seconds. We're joined by former FBI General Counsel, former prosecutor and MS Now legal analyst Andrew Weissman. Your thoughts on these two paths I mentioned tonight, what is a sustained backlash to much of what Trump is doing, and an apparent effort to expand or abuse powers over elections?
Well, maybe let's start with Minnesota, because that was such powerful testimony that you played. It is the case that right now, to keep it very human, there is no state investigation that has access to federal evidence because the federal government is not giving access to the evidence for Mr. Preddy or Ms. Good for no good reason. There's no valid reason I can think of. There's not even an announced federal investigation of the officer who shot Ms. Good. And there's some sort of investigation with respect to Mr. Preddy, but we have no details as to what exactly it is, and certainly no confidence that it is going to be independent and fair-minded when you have the president and vice president and Stephen Miller and other senior people announcing the conclusion before the investigation. And so you have that on the one hand, and you can add that into what you were just talking about and the hearing that you played. And then you have what is very, very scary in Georgia. And I think there is a very easy sort of big picture, which is that Donald Trump is saying that our electoral system is so corrupt that, he lost, but he really, he lost name only, but he really should have won. But yet he won 2 elections. So it's just so childish. So it's really, when he wins, it's fair. When he loses, it's because it's unfair. But he doesn't explain how the same system is at play throughout. Even when it was Republicans who were in charge of the system that he says he lost in. So to me, this is exceedingly scary in terms of what the federal government might try to do in advance of and during the midterm elections.
So what happens if he tries to ask the FBI to do this for current ballots rather than past?
Well, I think that is something that you could imagine he would try to get a court order. He could try to have Pam Bondi seize the ballots, as he said he regrets not doing previously. But as you said, Ari, I think quite correctly, the Constitution is really clear that the president, you don't have to be, as you said, you don't have to be a constitutional scholar. Here's the rule. The fox doesn't get to guard the hen house. You do not want to have the president deciding whether he has won or lost the election in the same way you don't have senators decide their own
and that's
races.
so known. I mean, I don't know if everyone relates to this, but I had an older brother, and if we had to share something like a cookie, it was one cuts, the other chooses. And that's almost, very basic Solomonic way to incentivize a fair judge, right? Whereas if I'm cutting and choosing, there's a good chance I take a bigger slice of the cookie, Andrew. You can relate.
I mean, look.
That's all obviously crap, right? When I ask you, though, as someone who was FBI general counsel, I mean, in the old days, and the Nixon examples we have even, there was a lot of internal pushback even then. I assume, you tell me if you were ever asked to do anything like that, but your first role would be to re-educate your bosses on what you can and can't do. Here, those guardrails, and we've covered this, are following internally at DOJ. So then what happens? I mean, they clearly shopped to indict Lemon, and I may have more on that tonight. We were covering that Friday night, Don Lemon, because they were rejected. So the guardrails were supposed to stop it, but they ended up only delaying it. How does that work if they're trying to use FBI or military powers in a future election?
Sure, it's going to go to the courts. There are organizations right now who are anticipating what will happen if the government is violating the Constitution. There will be people going to the court to say that this is unconstitutional and they cannot do it. We have seen district courts, courts of appeals, and even from time to time, the Supreme Court do it. Remember, with respect to Mr. Abrego Garcia, the court ruled 9-0 that due process was violated, that you cannot just extract people from the country and shove them in a prison in a godforsaken country to let them rot there without providing them notice and an opportunity to be heard. That's what this country requires as a matter of due process. And 9-0, the Supreme Court said that. So with all that can be said about the judicial system here, frankly, that's all we have left. We don't see Congress very often stepping up. We have no pushback within the executive branch. I can just, to answer your question really quickly about my own role, I, fortunately, having worked for 21 years at the Department of Justice under Republican and Democratic administrations, never was asked to do something like that, where I had to have that kind of conversation. And that's because there is, whether you disagree with particular policies of different administrations, people are there to abide by the Constitution and the rule of law. And that's true of Republican and Democratic administrations. That's what makes this so unusual. That's why you're seeing even today reports that in Minnesota, more and more federal prosecutors are resigning over what is happening.
14 federal prosecutors in Minnesota alone, which does send a message, and also delays at least what some of the efforts have been there, and you may see a hauling out of the government as one of the last resorts a year into this term. Andrew, thank you very much and for reminding us of that news.
Welcome.
We wanted to hit that. We will show viewers what Don Lemon is saying, speaking out. I caught up with him this weekend, and he's made his first interview there with Jimmy Kimmel. We're going to show you some of that. Conspiracy theories that dominate right-wing media have taken on a life of their own. We have a special report tonight on fact-checking Fox with a very special guest. But first, for all the things that aren't working, the DOJ has been forced to release far more Epstein files than they ever planned to. We got millions on Friday that shed light on Epstein's powerful circle, including individuals with close ties to both parties and the current president, Donald Trump. Thousands of messages with Steve Bannon. 2 hours of new footage, never before seen, although we'd reported on its existence. Bannon interviewing Epstein. They had become allies of sorts. Bannon trying to help rehab Epstein's reputation. This was shot in 2019.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question.
Sorry.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Because you have all the attributes. You're incredibly smart. You remember the devil is somebody knows.
Smart?
The devil's brilliant. You read Milton's Paradise Lost.
No, the devil scares me.
Video goes on like that. Bannon never actually put out what he said was going to be that project. Maybe obvious reasons why. A current Trump cabinet member, Howard Lutnick, appears in email exchanges that discuss a potential trip to Epstein's Island. This was in 2012, along with his family on a vacation, but it was years after Lutnick has publicly claimed that he had cut all ties with Epstein. These files, which otherwise would never have come out, appearing to undercut what was a Lutnick strategy. Lie. One would think he would remember this effort to be in contact with him. There are other names like Brett Ratner, who directed the Melania documentary that Amazon paid so much for and just came out. He's in a photograph with Epstein and an unidentified woman. Or a big, powerful law firm, Paul Weiss, has its chair, Brad Karp. They recently struck one of those big deals, giving millions to Trump last year through pro bono work. And he had what seemed to be friendly interactions with Epstein. Paul Weiss now says he regrets them. Trump also, of course, is in the files. The New York Times says over 5,000 times with references to Trump and Mar-a-Lago, and there were other related words about their family. As for Trump, Bannon, and Lutnick and Ratner, we should note these new disclosures don't involve any criminal wrongdoing, more just violations of their own statements or claims to have cut ties with Epstein. Republican lawmakers are also focused on the Clintons. There is now a deal afoot to have them give a deposition about all this. All eyes also on Maxwell, Epstein's convicted associate. She will be deposed on Monday. That comes after the DOJ held a very unusual and suspicious meeting between the Deputy Attorney General and her. The Trump DOJ also, under the same individual, Todd Blanche, had this to say.
We will always investigate any evidence of misconduct, but as you know, it is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. The American people need to understand that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. It isn't a crime to have
lunch. Didn't look like that's all that was going on some of those photos.
You could hear a little Fox News pushback on Todd Blanche's talking point. It's true, there shouldn't be guilt by association. Being in the emails or at a, quote, party is not itself a crime. But the problem is how this Trump DOJ seems to have avoided pursuing any leads. We now have a chart that we reported on Friday showing all the potential associates of Mr. Epstein. Only one, Maxwell, actually prosecuted. Here's Congressman Khanna.
At the very least, every single person who went to Epstein's Island should have an investigation. Just to say, oh, these were just rich people who were playboys, that's just disrespectful to these survivors.
We are still, in the journalistic community, going through what are millions of documents, files, photos, videos, and we will continue reporting out what we know in context. We will hear from Don Lemon tonight, as he has now spoken out since his arrest. But first, you know the HBO hit Succession. You know Fox News has settled a lot of defamation trouble. Tonight, we get into the real-life Murdoch succession next. Mogul Rupert Murdoch has been memorably captured by HBO's hit Succession, a show that satirized politics, media, billionaire excess, with characters clearly based on the Murdochs, and a cable news channel drawing on aspects of Fox News, including how even the so-called owners can sometimes lose control of the very passions they unleash in their audience. Murdoch built a media empire originally on newspapers and TV, then bought up some prestige outlets like the Wall Street Journal, fusing a business style with his own right-wing agenda.
You had the will to crush the unions.
No, I didn't have the will to crush the unions. I might have had the desire, but that took several years.
I didn't. I did. It just took a while. Murdoch, of course, wrote the Global Business Playbook, which many copy now, trotting into different countries, deploying media assets quite blatantly as political leverage, not independent journalism. He oversees companies that break all kinds of rules. Media outlets caught for illegally hacking into a child's phone. That proved too much even in the rough British tabloid world. Fox News has paid out for sexual harassment at the very top, and then the record $780 million punishment for lies about Trump's 2020 loss. Critics say those are terrible acts by powerful companies. Some capitalists say Fox paid a lot more for those lies than it ever made on them, at least in the short term. And politicos marvel at how Murdoch built an empire that doesn't just cover governments, but quite literally helps pick some of them. Beyond a conservative news empire, he erected a fourth branch of government, a propaganda machine, monetizing outrage, spreading conspiracy theories, and shaping the minds of millions. He created the Trump presidency, writes Gabe Sherman, the author of a new book about the mogul, which explores something else that we're about to get into. How all that power didn't enable Murdoch to really pump the brakes on Trump when Murdoch finally concluded that maybe things had gone too far, nor could he even maintain an orderly succession for his replacement in the empire, let alone family peace. A succession drama which spilled into court and forms the messy human side in this new book, Bonfire of the Murdochs, How the Epic Fight to Control the Last Great Media Dynasty Broke a Family and the World, by Vanity Fair's Gabe Sherman, a longtime media reporter. Welcome.
Thanks, Ari. Good to be here.
That point, all this money and planning, but it didn't ultimately work for his business succession, let alone family peace. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the themes of the book, that Rupert Murdoch built this media machine that devoured itself. You know, famously back in 2015, he did not want Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee. The Fox News audience did. And he had no choice but to jump on the bandwagon, because if they tuned out, if they went against Trump, the audience was going to defect. And so Rupert Murdoch became hostage not only to the Trump MAGA base, but also became hostage to his own children, who were fighting each other for control of the empire. And there's sort of a tragic irony that a man so powerful as Rupert Murdoch is spending the final years of his life feeling powerless.
Was that unavoidable, almost more Shakespearean?
Yeah.
Or did your reporting find that really was mistakes he made, that had he just picked the right person earlier on and stuck with it in a different way, that his conniving almost seemed to be like he was either used to running the game, which they show in the HBO show, or couldn't unlearn that?
Yeah, I think it's really more the Shakespearean aspect. I mean, this is something that was rooted in his childhood. His own father was very dismissive of him. He had the same sort of judgmental attitude towards his own children. And I think the book shows how these patterns have just repeated through the generations. And again, I think it carries over to the politics as well. Rupert Murdoch loves to play the political game, but what he loves more is profits. And Fox News's profits were the engine of the whole empire. And once Fox News latched on to Trump, it was basically a bull that he had no choice but to ride.
You also humanize him, which could be hard.
But he is a human, but yes.
But he's fact check. He is a human.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, you know, you show a lot of things that are ripe for criticism, the greed, the law breaking, and I think informed Americans have they know what Fox is. But then you show that this was a guy who was in allegedly a dispute with his wife, and she pushed him so hard he like fell down and breaks his.
Wendy, they had a big,
breaks a bone. You show him fighting for his life on the side of a mega yacht. Most people would say, all right, well, whatever, you're mega yacht. But you show someone in the way you report those stories a fighter who would not give up. Was there something about that in him?
I mean, of course. I mean, people might play the world's tiniest violin when you talk about the struggles of these billionaires, but there is something deeply human about someone who has all this power, but in the moment feels like their life is on the line, whether it's with his children, whether it's his health crises. And again, I think there's something... it's just a riveting story. Again, if you can separate out the politics, I just find it from the empire he built, whether you like it or hate it, you can't deny its power.
How do you find that your reporting is being received in his circle or in Fox News? Because in the same way that we're TV here, right? We're a competitor to them, but I'm trying to do this fairly.
Yeah.
You're doing your thing, but you're dealing with a lot of media people.
Yeah. I mean, so far it's been quiet, so we'll see. I mean, I'd love to get feedback on the book, but I've not heard from them directly.
So, you don't feel like they're on the attack or anything?
No.
And is he really in the background now? I mean, he really has his son running the empire?
Yeah, so Rupert Murdoch turned 95 on March 11th, and his son Lachlan is now firmly entrenched as the CEO. And, really was the passing of the torch. That said, he's not out of the game. I mean, Rupert Murdoch will never be out of the game. I mean, I think it will be on his way to the cemetery, still trying to make a phone call.
Would you say, don't hate the player, hate the game?
In what sense?
Don't hate the mogul, hate the game? Or some people think the mogul did a lot of bad things?
I mean, I think he also created the game. I mean, he was such a good player. He changed the rules of the game.
Yeah. And game recognized game.
Yeah.
Gabe Sherman.
Thank you.
The book is Bonfire of the Murdochs. It's out now. If you want to learn more about what we just discussed, I finished the book. It's an interesting read. Coming up, we will show you what Don Lemon is saying, his first remarks since leaving court there on this arrest.